Welcome to Mindful Escape, the podcast that helps you find your purpose and your passion. My name's Leighton Jewett and I am your host. And today we have Chris on the show. Chris runs his own retreats and he's going to talk about how he came from his corporate world into following his dreams to run retreats all over the world. This is a really beautiful episode and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. So listen closely and we'll jump straight in. Chris, welcome to Mindful Escape. Thanks for coming on the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Leighton. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a really exciting topic. And when I saw the podcast description, I was all on board immediately. So a little bit about myself. True to the nature of this podcast, I spent over 25 years, working in corporate, for corporate as a consultant, also a lot of startups and mid-sized companies, but just, in the working life and just learned a lot of things, had a couple pivotal points in there and just really looking forward to talking about that today.
Yeah, amazing. And where were you based previously?
I was mostly in LA. Starting with college, I was Los Angeles based and really in entertainment, media, and tech sectors.
Okay, great. All right. So this is going to be an interesting one. So tell us a little bit about the transition that kind of took you from what you were doing previously into what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, it's been quite the transition. I think I would say that already while I was still, in the kind of the working life and had my career goals and building the resume and all of this stuff, I chose the consultant career at somewhere along the way because I felt like I could attain a better life work balance and just going to the same place every single day just wasn't my cup of tea. And so, but even after that, I realized that there was something missing. I was had a good, like I said, balance of life, was able to pursue passions. And when things got busy, I would just focus on work and just do that. And I would achieve the things. And I was kind of on paper living a nice, balanced life, but something was still missing. And so at some point, there were little moments along the way where I remember one moment. I was driving down La Cienega in Los Angeles, a busy street in downtown LA, and I was starting to really stress out. I'd said yes to too many projects, I guess, and I'd taken on a lot of work, and I was nearing exhaustion and almost like a panic anxiety moment in anticipating all the work that I had coming up, that all the meetings I had to take and what I had to prepare and so forth. And I think just my natural survival mechanism in that moment told me to let go and to surrender and to not try and control everything and anticipate every possible outcome and every possible scenario. If they say this, what do I do then? And so forth. And in that moment of just allowing myself to be where I was and not stressing over the next moment that hadn't arrived yet, right? All this potential opened up for me. I was like, wow, I have a lot more capacity than I thought, because I was weighing myself down with trying to predict the future, essentially. So, but I was as a user experience designer, I was in the field of designing products, meaningful experiences, around services and so forth. And I didn't realize that there was a good chunk of mindfulness in that already. It was need-based design, right? So understanding, listening, beginner's mind, observing, and looking for the unmet need and the customer, as opposed to designing from ego and I know what's best, what they people should be using or how they should be behaving and so forth. But all of that didn't really dawn on me until I started living a little more mindful and conscious life. And so I would say, to your question, I don't think anything just pivots, 180 out of nowhere. I think one thing always leads to the next. It may look different on the surface, but we bring ourselves, our whole evolution, along the way. I mean, that's what caused the pivot, right? So it's we're coming along for the ride, no matter where we go.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And something that seems to be a common theme with the people that I'm speaking to is that on paper, a lot of the time, it looks like your life is perfect. You're a high performer, you've got a good job, you're earning good money, you're ticking all the boxes, but there's something there that's like, doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah. And so for me then really it was while I was, pursuing passions and I wasn't reaching the state of fulfillment as I was supposed to, right? And, people tell you should do what you're passionate about. So I carved out enough time to spend time on the things I really loved, and sports and music and so forth, and travel, and yet even then something was missing. And so being a seeker mentality, I just started looking a little deeper. You don't have to hit rock bottom for these things to start to dawn on you. And for me, it was that way too. It's just like something was missing, and just started looking a little deeper. And so I noticed I was still, even in the passions, I was still living for outcomes. I was still not present with the experience of whatever it was I was immersed in, but I was still in my mind always looking for that, achieving that outcome, that goal, that final state when everything, all the pieces are in place, and I'll finally be happy. And so you could be doing whatever you want to be doing in the world. You won't find fulfillment if we're always living for a future moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So true. When you were going through that transition, if you like, because I've met a few people who, let's not say hit rock bottom, but they've hit a big moment in their life, maybe health or family or something that's been had a big impact, and it's almost too late. They should have realized earlier. And it seems like you caught onto it earlier than perhaps a lot of other people do. Is there anything you could suggest that if there are people who are feeling a little bit stuck, unsure, maybe missing something, like what tips could you give that person to help them from where they are right now?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would say listen to your body, listen to your inner voice. I think we all have that inner voice that tells us if something resonates or it doesn't. And I mean, for me, it was I don't think I was any different. I saw the same thing happening to many of my friends, and the difference I think was maybe I didn't, numb out and just go to work the next day. I did take time off, and because of as a freelancer, I was able to carve out some time to go a little soul searching, and but I don't think anything was different with me other than I just kind of listened to the signs of something's not right. And even I mean mainstream has a word for this. It's midlife crisis, right? And when you've been doing something for 10, 20 plus years and it's not nurturing the being essence in us, it's only nurturing the doing, and outcome. We become depleted somewhere deep inside. And so that'll catch up with us. And like you said, with a lot of people, the wake up call comes with some kind of physical ailment, or just sheer deep unhappiness, depression. But these are all wake up signs, and so they serve a purpose. They're happening for a reason. So that would be my advice: is just to listen to the signs.
Yeah, I think it's very easy for people to go onto that autopilot and, as you say, that numbing mentality. But yeah, no, that's great. On your journey, what were the biggest challenges that came up through that transition? I know you mentioned about following your passions and still not enjoying the journey. Was there
Mhm.
anything else that came up that was really difficult for you?
Well, it's really, we're so conditioned to live through the mental lens, right? To think we're in control, to think that the I call it our belief, our truth structure, the few hundred, maybe a few thousand beliefs that we carry about ourselves and the world that we think is reality, and that is extremely limiting. And when we kind of go on that journey of, well, how do we start to go deeper? It's really about letting go of these beliefs. And it can be scary. It can be frightening because we don't really know what's on the other side of it. And that's the whole point is we have to come out of our headspace, because the head is so obsessed with knowing, right? The mind is a tool designed to know things. But if we exclusively live through that mind, then we're going to freak out. And I was definitely still very much in my head at that time. And it's dealing with the unknown, being comfortable with not knowing and having to bit by bit, super reluctantly let go of all these beliefs. It can be scary. And I think you just have to, there's no other way around it but through it, right? As the saying goes. And having I think maybe a support network, or at least a place to go to find others who've gone through it, like this podcast, is really important, because the last thing you want to do is feel like you're the only one who's experiencing this, and you're the crazy one.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I felt going through my process of, hang on, why am I living life like this? And then I'm speaking to other people and they're like, yeah, that is what life is. And I'm like, surely not. There must be more to it. But yeah, and I felt like I was going crazy, and I was speaking to people and they were acting like I was going crazy. But yeah, I just felt like there must be something more. And for me, it was about finding what I was passionate about, what was my purpose. And at that time, I was on autopilot. I was just doing my day job, walking the dog, doing the things that you do every single day, and not giving myself that time to do the soul searching. Like you said, it is so important. And did you find it easy to find other people going on a similar journey, or what was your experience like?
Not at that time. I look back, I just mentioned this to somebody today, how I can't believe that I didn't know about, everything from law of attraction to Eckhart Tolle to Byron Katie to just Deepak Chopra. I mean, just all, and then, the ancients, and all that information is out there. And yet I never came across it. How is that possible? The internet, at the very least, should have brought it to me somehow.
Yeah.
And still I was so in my own world, and that was not on my radar. So, like the saying goes, when we start to tune into something, and not until we do that, we won't see it. It's all there, but we have to be at least a little bit in tune with it to start receiving.
Yeah, there was a podcast I was listening to the other day, and it was talking about you could read the same book twice and it gives you the same information, but it's only when you're open to that information you will actually learn and receive it. And I've reread books that I read 4 or 5 years ago, and it's like, wow, that's a completely different book.
Yeah, because you're a completely different person now, right? And that's it. Everything is a mirror. Everything we experience is a reflection of who we are and how we process things, and the way by which we process things. If it's all through the mind, through comparison, through mental judgment and defining and labeling, or are we feeling and experiencing and just allowing things to be?
Yeah. There were obviously a few different segments of your journey. Was there a particular lesson along the way that you felt was really profound or was really important to your transition on your journey?
Yeah. Well, I think it was in hindsight, right? As things often go and become more clear. I didn't realize at the time early on that I didn't need to move to the other side of the world and sell everything I had and, leave all that behind in order to actually inhabit and embrace my journey, right? It was a sign of still seeking yourself in the external, right? I was still attached to these things and the meaning they carried, right, or the meaning I had assigned to them. And in hindsight, that's not necessary. You don't have to do that. You can find that space and that inner stillness and that depth in any situation. In fact, a lot of people cannot, due to their circumstances, just up and leave. And so the good news for them is becoming a better parent or better partner or better coworker or better leader, better neighbor. All of these things, they don't stem from, trying to change yourself from the outside in, but rather you bring change to those situations by working on yourself from the inside out.
Yeah, that's really good advice, actually, because I think when I was going through that transition, I was starting to incorporate mindfulness, meditation, yoga, and practices like that to help me get into the right headspace. And often people will say to me, well, I can't just quit my job and sell everything like you did. It sounds like you did the same, did you?
Yes, exactly.
And it does make it difficult because obviously you quit your job, you haven't got an income. And if you are supporting a family, children, have a mortgage, it does make it really difficult. So it's really important to mention. Would you have any tips for someone who's in that situation to be more mindful and start the transition without having to just quit and
Yeah.
leave?
Yeah. Well, one thing to look at really is, I think many, maybe even the majority of people are called to bring change to the situations they're already in. And possibly that can be a much more powerful source of transformation is when we bring our new, refined, reformed self into the workplace and not trying to proselytize, but just being a better listener, a more, there's a quality and energy that we develop from just being more present in every moment and being more in tune with our body, our groundedness, all the things that you just mentioned, meditation and breath work, and just having a practice of gratitude and putting that stuff in place first and foremost, and seeing how that impacts your day to day before you take a bigger step as to, I do really feel like I need to go into a different environment altogether for nature reasons, for cultural reasons, but not for the I'm running away from my old life reason, right?
Yeah, there's a few things you mentioned there actually that I think are really helpful. So the breath work, taking yourself out of that zone that you're in, because often we can get really tunnel vision, and just taking a few breaths can really bring us back into our awareness. I found that meditation enables both myself, and I've seen it with other people, be better listeners, because you're more patient, you're calmer, you're absorbing the information, you're listening and then responding rather than thinking of your response before they finish talking. And the nature thing as well was fascinating for me because in London, there isn't a huge opportunity to go into nature, but there are some big parks, and often going into a forest or a heath or a park or something, you can really just slow down and contemplate life and think about what you're doing and what you want to do. And I think there's something so beautiful about just being in natural environments.
Yeah. And there's lots of, research for people who want the science as well that shows just taking off your shoes and socks and putting your feet in dirt, on the ground, in the grass. The ions start to go all throughout our body and it activates, all our vital systems. And so there's little things like that we can do that don't interrupt, our day in a big way. And, even with meditation and breath work. I mean, I do the 4-7-8 breathing every morning. There's 3 breaths. Dr. Andrew Weil pioneered that, and that is already just the best way for me to start the day. It takes about a minute.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot we can do. You just have to start looking and see what works for you, and then kind of stick with it.
Yeah. I think there's two challenges there for anyone who's listening. One is 4-7-8, so 4-second breath in, 7-second hold, 8-second out. And then the second challenge is taking your shoes and socks off when you're walking through the park.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. Often we don't get into a mindfulness practice, and I was certainly subject to this early on. The idea of having to sit every day and for an hour or even just 15 minutes and meditate was so foreign to me. And it seemed just too overwhelming, too big. And also something I learned later on as I started teaching meditation and mindfulness and so forth, where when we feel overwhelmed by this, this idea of doing something, well, it's just an idea. It's a thought that is too big, and we feel overwhelmed by it. And there's nothing that stops us from simplifying that thought, reducing it down to something that seems easy, maybe even light and fun. And so the example that I use is my mom, who lived in Europe, had triple bypass surgery and was overwhelmed by this idea of coming to see me in California. It was just too big of a trip. And so what we did with her is we really just broke it down into these simple tasks of folding your clothes. And now you're putting them in the suitcase. And now you're carrying the suitcase to the steps. And now you're sitting in the car and so forth. And suddenly the whole trip seemed manageable, right? So we have so many tools at our disposal to make something that seems so overwhelming that keeps us from getting off the couch and starting and start doing. Really, it's the mind.
Yeah, I really like that. That's such a nice way to break it down, because I often relate it to things like running a business or going to the gym or going out for a run. Like, you just have to do the first step and then you build on it. But thinking about traveling, people that don't like traveling, that's a great example. And I guess there's so many other aspects of your life where you can incorporate that. Yeah.
Yeah, I do it with to this day. I do that with the gym. If I feel resistance, because just it's a whole hour and I've got other things to do and so forth, I focus on where are the keys to my scooter, and now I'm tying my shoes, and now where I'm looking for my towel and so forth. And just these are simple, easy tasks that ultimately life is simple. If the moment as it arrives is hardly ever so complicated and so overwhelming that we can't get through it, right? We just have to keep it manageable and small enough. And really that is what presence is.
Yeah. And I think with any task, I mean, you can liken it to climbing a mountain, right? Looking at that mountain, it looks like it's going to be scary, but you break it down bit by bit. And as you've done with any aspect in your life, yeah, that's really beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and that really ties into what we were saying earlier about living for outcomes. If you're so focused on reaching that mountaintop, even if you get through the scary part of, the mountain is so big, I'll never make it, it'll take forever. And we're still focused on something that we're going to miss the journey. So getting there is really 99% of the experience. It's what hardens us and deepens us, and we learn new skills, and we get a sense of our capacity and our limits, and it's the stories that come from this happen along the way. I actually write in my book about that very analogy, is how like you could take a helicopter to the top and come back with the exact same pretty pictures, but you will have missed the journey.
Yeah, that's very true. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're up to right now?
Oh, yes. So again, the things we, experience, and usually it's the challenging situations that then become our calling, right? It's so funny how life works. When resistance to these things that cause us, difficulty in life. And as we overcome these things, we become experts at overcoming those things. And then we're in a position to offer help and teach others through situations like that. So I think for me, early on, it was, I was looking for answers early in my journey. And I found myself having to read a whole book just to find a little paragraph for what I was dealing with, or going to retreats, and it would just be all talk, rational. That's great, but then it would be all yoga, or it'd be all meditation, and it was just, it seemed too one-sided, and I felt like something fuller, a more complete experience was missing. And so that's what I'm really focusing on these days, is creating mindfulness retreats that bring a healthy balance and mix between the being essence of breath work and meditation and conscious movement, and yoga, of course, and then having activities in architecture and culinary and nature, and I mean just cultural events and exotic dance, and just really combining the two in a way where they're not separate. Because I think and I struggled with this early on. I felt like my meditation sit in the morning just was a separate thing, and then I go live the rest of my life. And it's really about taking that presence and consciousness that we nurture during our mindfulness sessions, and bringing that into the doing, right? Bringing the being essence into the doing, and really practicing that. It's awareness is like any old muscle that's going to the gym. You have to develop it and for it to grow. And so that's what we do at their 7-day retreats. And we just really create a structure, a daily routine that helps you keep the groundedness, nurture and build that awareness muscle, and then take that into your daily situations. It's something I wish I had, and I would definitely attend my own retreat now if I wasn't leading it.
Yeah. And where are you doing those retreats at the moment?
Those are both here in Bali, but also globally. Just have to check my calendar. We choose destinations that have just a deep cultural element. So you get both the vacation and the adventure aspect, and as well as the deepening and the going within aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important to try and encompass everything. Yeah, I can definitely relate to your experiences of having too much of one thing and not being able to integrate into your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. And there's a lot of people, kind of in the traditions, there's this sense that we have to reject the outside world in order to find that inner peace. My experience has been that it's actually the opposite. We are these amazing spiritual beings finding ourselves suddenly in this 3-dimensional space, and with these senses, sights and sounds and smells, and just we should become infatuated by all of that. It's just an amazing experience. Of course, we seek our complete self in these external things, and it's temporary happiness that we experience, and then ultimately that points us to the one place we haven't looked yet, which is within. So I always say, follow, Joseph Campbell, follow your bliss, and your life will lead you to where you should be and where you're at home.
yeah, that's really beautiful. What advice would you give to your younger self? As we mentioned before, hindsight is a wonderful thing. Is there any advice you'd give your younger self?
Well, I'm of two minds there, or two hearts. One is I don't usually entertain that, because I am who I am, and my path unfolded the way it did just because exactly of who I was at every step of the way. And so there's nothing to regret. There's nothing to bemoan. There's nothing you should change, because it had to happen that way. And I think with some time, we all kind of look back, and first of all, it all happened completely differently than we expected, which should be a sign of like how, effective our life planning really is. And this monkey mind, right, that we rely on. And so learning to just let go a bit and surrender and start going with the flow is kind of the natural evolution of that of most people. Um, but yeah, for the sake of entertaining and having fun conversations around it, I would probably say that um, I didn't see the things that happened as gifts soon enough. I lingered on them for a very long time. And years and years and years on certain experiences of why me, why did that happen to me, and just to have kind of, because there was other parts of me that were much more aware, and I kind of could see myself having clicked into a place of, well, what lesson is this teaching me? What is this situation showing me about myself? And that's just a good kind of baseline mindset to have, is like, whatever happens, your plans were just completely usurped by something, unpredictable, rather than, crying over spilt milk, is just really look at what is life trying to say to you.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And something that came to mind there was often we look at things and say, why is that happening to me? And to reframe that and say, why is this happening for me? And
Oh,
there's a reason there, right? It's giving you a lesson if it's bad, it's giving you enjoyment if it's good, and just finding a reason behind why that's happening in your life. And as you say, being grateful for it and not looking at it like something you don't want to happen.
yeah, that's beautiful. Why did it happen for me? If I ever say that, I'm going to have to credit you for that, because that's beautiful. Yeah, it's taking on this mindset of life really is magical, right? And it ultimately, as we just went through a few examples of, situations that challenges brought about growth and healing and expansion and stepping into your true self and your inner power and all of this. Ultimately, life wants you to heal. It wants you to grow. It wants you to become your fullest you, right? And if we kind of just keep that in the back of our mind, even through the tumultuous times, then it'll serve us well.
Yeah. It sounds like where you are now in your life, you are very spiritual, and spiritual is obviously a very broad term and thrown around a lot. But to try and simplify it, would you say that in your old life, in inverted commas, that corporate world that you were living, were you in touch with spirituality as much, or what was your thoughts around that?
Hmm. I lived in my head so much. And we talked about, what were some of the first signs or experiences that started opening me up. And I remember having these, what I thought were wonderful debates and conversations where I would, with friends or family, I would analyze a situation, but really analyze it to death. And I remember I was left feeling just depleted and empty and hollow, and I didn't understand why, because I thought I had given all this attention to a particular topic and really, went deep on it. But I was just creating these mental loops, and I just didn't leave me feeling that well. And so I think that then led to uh, also noticing if I was making choices that would ultimately stem out of this mental fixation, obsession, right, of overthinking. And I was certainly, you know, I did that for a very long time of just thinking everything through too much. And, understanding how the mind works, ultimately, you only know what you know. And so you're really just taking what you already know and trying to come up with a creative solution for your life. And it's just very limiting. And then I would reflect on things like my piano music playing, of how I was a different person there, or when I was playing tennis on the court, being just in the flow there in the zone, and how I was a different person there. So, we should look at the things. Life isn't black and white. There's some areas where we have more awareness and some areas where there's less. And that will continue forever anyway. There's blind spots still pop up here and there. Oh my goodness, I had no idea. I was completely unconscious in this area. And just looking at what works and what doesn't. And again, listening to yourself and letting really what feels right lead the way. And that way, kind of life starts to open up on its own, as opposed to you trying to steer and control everything.
Yeah. Would you say that it's moving with what feels good?
Well, the funny thing is that a calling, I sometimes get the question of how can you tell between your true purpose or just another idea that you came up with, and somebody else maybe said, and you think it's your idea now, and so forth. And I think one's true calling, there's an element of it's the word calling, right? You're being called to something, which implies that you're not ready yet. You're not fully there yet. So there's a discomfort to it. It means, oh my gosh, I'm being called to do something, and that means I may have to take classes or work on this part of my personality. Or I used to be very introverted, and it would be horrified to if somebody told me I'm now on public speaker and podcasts and so forth. Or I'd never written a book before until I wrote my book, and that just came out of journaling, just sitting down and saying I'm going to write 100 words today, and if I tear it up afterwards, it doesn't matter. But just giving yourself the chance, right? And just, you said earlier of like just lean into something a little bit, give yourself a chance, and you never know what can happen from there.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. Where can people find you online if they want to look you up?
So my website, Cirak.com. That's CIRAK.com. I'm also everywhere on social media at Chris Cirak. And my book's on Amazon, and have a self-narrated version on Audible. So if you punch in my name, you'll find me.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Chris, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. It's been a lovely conversation.
Thank you, Leighton. I want to come back. This is too beautiful of a topic.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think we can go a lot deeper with this. So yeah, we'll get you back on soon, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
And there we have it. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. There's a real powerful story there behind getting out of your head and listening to your gut instincts. Follow your heart, follow your passions, and leaning into the things that really feel right for you. And something that Chris and I discussed after the recording was about when you start to let things go, opportunities arise, and you can't imagine how amazing things could get if you just allow them to. So there was a couple of challenges in there. So if you're up for it, next time you're at the park, make sure you take your shoes and socks off, get your feet nice and muddy, and feel the connection with the earth. And if you get an opportunity, try out the breathwork exercise. Again, it was 4 seconds in, 7-second hold, and 8 seconds on the way out. I hope you enjoyed that episode, and if you found value in it, make sure you share it on your social media and share it with a friend, and I'll see you again same time next week.